Right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all honor and glory, infinite praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim Achak Wadash, double honor to the elders and apostles of GMS, peace and salutations to the hopeful elect out there pushing His word in truth and sincerity. All right, for this lesson, I will be breaking down Sirach, the 13th chapter. All right, so I'm gonna just read it. All right, flow through the spirit. If any precepts hop in my spirit, all right, I'm gonna bring it out. All right. So this is Sirach Chapter 13. Sirach Chapter 13 and verse 1. It says, "He that touch a pit shall be defiled therewith, and he that have fellowship with a proud man shall be like unto him." Yeah, so if you touch a pit, right, what I think about immediately, right, when you let's say you have, right, you cleaning a bike, right, and you touching the chain, right, and it has like that little black substance. All right, if you touch that black substance, right, your hand starts to get dirty. Okay, so anybody who decides to keep company around proud people, right, wicked individuals, right, people who you know for a fact are going off, all right, you're gonna be just like unto that person, right? Just like how that black substance, all right, dirties your hand, right? That person's company, that person's energy, right, spirit, all right, could rub off on you, right? I'm gonna read it in the GNT. It says, "If you touch tar, it will stick to you, and if you keep company with arrogant people, you will come to be just like them." All right. Verse 2. Once again, Sirach, all right, in the prologue of Sirach, right, it says, "Those who are addicted to learning and basically want to live a godly, wise life," right? The book of Sirach is a very profitable book to read, right? A lot of wise sayings, all right, on how to operate on a daily basis. Okay. Verse 2, it says, "Burden not thyself above thy power, while thou livest, and have no fellowship with one that is mightier and richer than thyself." Right, so burden not thyself for anything that's above your power, all right, and have no fellowship with somebody who's mightier than you are. It says, "For how agree the kettle and the earthen pot together, for if the one be smitten against the other, it shall be broken." Verse 2, GNT, it says, and once again, right, a lot of these precepts are straight to the point. Okay, so you can read it, and it really needs no further elaboration, right? Verse 2, it says, "Don't try to lift up something too heavy for you, and don't keep company with people who are richer and more powerful than you. You cannot keep a clay pot next to an iron kettle. The pot will break if it hits the kettle." Verse 3, "The rich man have done wrong, and yet he entreateth withal. The poor is wrong, and he must entreat also." Right, so you can have a rich man, all right, who's doing wrong, all right, but it result in no type of punishment, right, because that individual was rich. Okay, and then you have a poor man, all right, who what it said, a poor man who was wrong, and he would still have to apologize even though he was the one that was wrong. In the GNT, it says, "If a rich person wrongs someone, he can afford to add insult to injury, but if a poor person is wrong, he is forced to apologize for himself." Right, so it's just showing you how things operate, all right, in the world that we live in. All right, verse 4, it says, "If thou be for his profit, he will use thee, but if thou have nothing, he will forsake thee." Right, so if you're helping this individual, right, this rich man, if you're some type of profit to him, however it may be, right, he will be there for you, right, he'll help you, right. But if you have no type of profit to him, if he can't use you for anything, right, he's going to forsake you. It says, "If thou have anything, he will live with thee, yea, he will make thee bear and will not be sorry for it." GNT, "He will live with you as long as you have anything and will gladly drain you dry." All right. Verse 6, "If he have need of thee, he will deceive thee and smile upon thee and will put thee in hope. He will speak thee fair and say, what wantest thou?" Right. So if he needs you for something, right, he will speak nice words to you, right? He will appear that he's some type of friend, okay, only because he needs something from you, right? But then it said what? Well, let's read that at GNT. It says, "If he needs you, he will trick you with his smiles and cheerful, kindly words. Do you need anything, he will ask? And he will shame thee by his meats until he have drawn thee dry twice or thrice, and at the last he will laugh thee to scorn Afterward, when he seeth thee, he will forsake thee and shake his head at thee. 7, it says, GNT. He will feed you until you are embarrassed. Finally, when he has drained you 2 or 3 times over, he will laugh at you. If you see him later, he'll pretend he doesn't know you, and he will pass you by. Right? So, once again, right, Sirach, all right, it's a lot of wise sayings, all right, written in the book of Sirach, right? And help us once again on our daily day basis in living in this world. Okay, so as the priestess says, right, the scriptures talk about how we're supposed to walk wisely, right, redeeming the time because the days are evil, right, but it also says walk with wisdom to those that are without, right. So these precepts help us, all right, help us equip ourselves on exactly how to do that. Okay, so it's just going into certain scenarios that you might find yourself in. Okay, dealing with rich men, dealing with men who's mightier than you, mightier than yourself, right? How to move wisely amongst these men, right? The mindset that these men might have, all right, and how you supposed to move, all right, as a believer of Yahushua, right? Trying, all right, to not find yourself in a messed up predicament, all right. It says, and he was shamed. Verse 8, it says, beware that thou be not deceived and brought down into thy jollity. Be careful not to be misled. You can be enjoying yourself and suddenly find yourself humiliated. Verse 9, if thou be invited of a mighty man, withdraw thyself, and so much the more he will invite thee. Right, so if you invited by somebody, right, who is mighty than you, for example, right, let's say, right, this now, we know this, well, I could use this as a lower term, right, as a lower example, right, more realistic. Let's say you're invited by your boss, right, to a promotion meeting, right. You might want to approach it, a little humbly, okay? Because then he will want to even promote you even that much more, right? Then it says what? Press thou not upon them, lest thou be put back. Stand far off, lest thou be forgotten, right? But at the same time, you don't want to harass him. Like, what's up with that promotion you was talking about? All right. But then you also don't want to, be too far away from him to where he forgets that he even spoke to you about giving you a promotion, okay? So it's talking about what? It's talking about balance and how to deal, all right, on your everyday basis. Affect not to be made equal unto him in talk, and believe not his many words. For with much communication will he tempt thee, and smiling upon thee will get out thy secrets. Right. So don't try to make yourself equal to someone who has a higher position over you. Right. It could be your boss. Right. That's not wise. Okay, it says, keep not much company with him, right? Believe not his many words. All right, it says he will tempt thee, and smiling he will try to get thee out of thy secrets. Let's read it, GNT. Don't pretend to be his equal or trust everything he says. In spite of all his long and polite conversation, he is testing you. Verse 12, but cruelly he will lay up thy words, and will not spare to do thee hurt, and to put thee in prison. Observe and take good heed, for thou walkest in peril of thy overthrowing. When thou hearest these things, awaken thy sleep. Right, as I quoted, right, it says walk in wisdom, right, redeeming the time because the days are evil. All right, so that's the time that we're living in evil, like the priestess says, right, we're living in perilous times, right. And as I quoted, right, the scriptures talk about how we're supposed to walk in wisdom. Okay, so these precepts, once again, they equipped us on how to exactly just do just that. Verse 14, it says, love the Lord all thy life, and call upon him for thy salvation. Right, so love the Heavenly Father with all your life and call upon him for your salvation. All right, we might be put in these type of scenarios, right, these type of predicaments to where you can actually apply these precepts, and there might be certain times where it's out of your control. All right, and what do? We rely upon the Heavenly Father for all things, right? All right, love the Lord with all thy life, all right, and trust upon him. And call upon him for thy salvation. Okay. Verse 15. Every beast loveth his like, and every man loveth his neighbor. All flesh consorteth according to kind, and a man will cleave to his like. Right. So the type of person you are, right, you would want to hang out with other people who are like you. Okay. If you're a man of the Most High, right, you believe in the precepts, you fear the Lord, you want to be around other individuals that also fear the Most High. Verse 17, what fellowship have the wolf with the lamb, so the sinner with the godly. So his fellowship had the wolf with the lamb. What does the wolf do? What does the wolf do? The wolf eats the lamb, right? The wolf is the predator, and the lamb is the prey. So what fellowship does the sinner have with the godly? Right? There's not a lot of much. When you look at your life and the way you live it, right? How you fear the Most High, you apply the precepts, and you look at somebody who doesn't fear the Lord and how does he live it, and he doesn't apply the precepts, right? There's not much you two will have in common. Verse 18. What agreement is there between the hyena and a dog, and what peace between the rich and the poor? The same applies with the rich and the poor. As the wild asses the lions prey in the wilderness, so the rich eat up the poor. As the proud hateth humility, so the rich abhor the poor. A rich man beginning to fall is held up of his friends, but a poor man being down is thrust also away by his friends. I'm gonna read those precepts in the GNT. Rich people have, verse 18 GNT on down, rich people have no more in common with poor people than hyenas have with dogs. The rich hunt down the poor just as lions hunt down wild donkeys in the open country. Arrogant people have nothing but scorn for the humble, and the rich think of the poor in the same way. So it's just showing you the correlation between the rich and the poor. It says, a rich man beginning to fall is held up of his friends, but a poor man being down is thrust also away by his friends. Right, so you have a rich man who may appear to be stumbling in any type of way, right, falling in any type of way. He'll have friends to help him up. All right, but a poor man, right, could fall and he has nobody to help him up, right? They will actually push him down further. Why? Because he's simply just poor. Verse 22. When a rich man is fallen, he hath many helpers. He speaketh things not to be spoken, and yet man justify him. The poor man slipped, and yet they rebuked him too. He spake wisely and could have no place. So it's basically saying the same thing. I'm reading GNT Sirach 22 GNT. It says, when somebody rich makes a mistake, there are many people to cover up for him and explain all the things he never should have said. But let someone poor make a mistake, and he gets nothing but criticism. Even if what he says make good sense, nobody will listen. Verse 23. When a rich man speaketh, every man holdeth his tongue, and look what he saith, they extol it to the clouds. But if the poor man speak, they say, what fellow is this? And if he stumble, they will help to overthrow him. Right, so basically the same thing. You have a rich man who will receive all these type of benefits simply because he's rich, all right? And that poor man doesn't receive that same benefits, even if he's a wise poor man, all right? Verse 24, it says, riches are good unto him that have no sin, and poverty is evil in the mouth of the ungodly. Right, so riches are good unto him that has no sin, right? You can have a brother who's well off, all right? And once again, right, what do we want to be rich in? We want to be rich in faith, okay? And it says poverty is evil in the mouth of the ungodly. Right, that makes me think of poor Edomites. Okay, you ever see a homeless Edomite? It's like looking at a two-time loser because this is Esau's world. I'm gonna read this in the GNT. There's nothing wrong with being rich if you haven't sinned to get that way, but there is nothing sinful about being poor either. only the ungodly think so. Sometimes GNT doesn't really accurately break it down a lot. All right, and we ultimately go back to the KJV. But it says, riches are good unto him that have no sin, and poverty is evil in the mouth of the ungodly. The heart of a man changeth his countenance, whether it be for good or evil, and a merry heart maketh a cheerful conscience. Right, so whatever's in your spirit, right, that's what your conscience is gonna look. Right, if you have a brother who believes in the Heavenly Father, right, he will have a joyful conscience, right, because that's what comes with the spirit. All right, as the priest says, right, he that keep his mind steady upon the Lord shall be in perfect peace. All right, I'm gonna see what that says in GNT. It is what is in your heart that makes the expression on your face happy or sad. It says a cheerful countenance is a token of a heart that is in prosperity, and the finding out of parables is a wearisome labor of mind. Right, so if you have a cheerful spirit, you're gonna appear cheerful. If you have a sad spirit, you're gonna appear sad. All right, and the find out of parables is a wearisome labor of mind. Right, get into the precepts, understand the breakdowns, Going over prophecy, the scriptures, right, is labor, right? It takes time and it takes effort, which is why the priestess liken it unto farming. Okay, but that's Sirach, the 13th chapter. I want to give all honor and glory, infinite praise to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh. Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim Achad, B'dash, Shalom.